So in the past couple of months this year, we've seen a number of incidents where mine workers essentially staged sit-ins underground. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, Impala Platinum's workers staged a sit-in, and they held some of their members of management, we're told, hostage is the word that was being used in that particular incident. So we're asking this morning, is this going to be the new norm for how we should actually deal with labor issues and disputes in the mining sector? Let's get you a sense of what at least one political analyst says. The Northwest University lecturer and political commentator Leeto Nthoba joins us now via our video link, live to us from that province. And Leeto, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. I wanted to start with just laying the foundation around what you reckon is actually happening here. Now that we've had a bit of time to reflect, are you seeing that these issues within the mining sector are finally reaching tipping point, or is it workers finding a new way of expressing these grievances that they've had?
Good morning, Ayanda. Thank you for having me. I'm actually at the Central University of Technology, not the Northwest University.
Oh, right.
But yes, but I think what firstly we're seeing is the tipping point of something, right? It's actually the loss of strength of the union, NUM, right? Because that's always been the major union around the mines in South Africa. And so what we're seeing is the tipping point of workers sort of rejecting the homogeneous power that they've always had. But secondly, it's also miners now being aware that striking in the open with the audacity of the government in Marikana to just shoot at them while the cameras were watching, led them to now see that the value of their lives isn't as high as they assumed they were. And so they then would want to strike in a place where they know they have a tactical advantage, where officers would not just go in blasting their guns at them. They are much safer underground than they would be in open ground, openly striking against the management and the system that be. But also, I think the other thing that we're seeing is that the way the wages have always been negotiated, the workers are also starting to reject that in general, because they've never actually been at the center of wage negotiations as far as the National Union of Mine Workers and the Chamber of Mines, or now the Minerals Council, has been concerned. And so the workers now are starting to become the activists of old, right? When the National Union of Mine Workers was starting out, they were the activists. They were actively organizing sit-ins, actively organizing strikes in order to get their point across. And I think that's what we're seeing more than anything else, the weakness of the NUM, and also the way they have not been at the center of negotiations has gotten to the point where workers don't want to negotiate in what we would call fair terms with the Chamber of Mines.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen some kind of shift when it comes to the labor landscape in this country, because even unions, which in some respects had legitimacy, they've seemed to have kind of lost that kind of influence, and they too have been caught, if you like, with their pants down, given just how much of what's taken place has been also out of their control. But given the fact that we haven't really been in this kind of space before, how do you see all of this playing out in 2024?
I think it's going to get worse, because when you talk to mine workers around Welkom, the area that I live in, we still have mine workers here. And if you listen to them, one, they're very, very concerned about their wages and how their wages haven't changed. So I think towards the middle of next year, we're even going to start to hear the racialized nature of how wages in mines work. Miners have a problem with white workers coming in, and the ratio of a new mine worker versus a mine worker who's been there for 10 years is 4-to-1. So a young upstart miner who's white would get 4 times the salary that a 10-year veteran would get. And so all of those, I think, are coming to the fore, which is what you are seeing. But also, when you're talking about the unions, one of the demands was very strange, right? When you're talking to the platinum miners sitting, one of their conditions was they wanted their pension funds paid out. because they thought, because there was a transition between the mine that they were at and towards the new mine, they thought that the management of their funds should be in their own hands. But the question that we should be asking even greater was, where was the NUM or even AMCU during this period? Because what then happens is the union starts to refute what the workers are saying in the memorandum. And so you start to see that there's a huge chasm between workers and unions, because how is it that workers are making up a memorandum outside the presence of an NUM or even any kind of regional power when it comes to unions, and giving the memorandum not to management but to the union? And so it shows you that the union has now become a pariah in the eyes of workers, that they share a much more comfortable position with the management, and the workers aren't really comfortable in engaging them when it comes to their wages and their concerns. And I think that's going to be a major problem, because now the union is not a representative of the workers anymore. It's become a buffer between the workers and the mine manager and the mine managers. And I think it's going to create a whole lot more chaos as we get more and more regional activists inside the workforce who are trying to establish themselves as legitimate powers outside of what the union structures already are. And I think that's going to be a major feature of what we're going to see next year in the wage negotiations.
Fascinating, because it also raises questions around what the future of unions look like, right? What roles do they play? And in fact, are they still relevant given what we've seen taking place in the industry? But, you know, in economics, they'll tell you that whenever there's a moment of negotiation between workers and management, both will hold out as long as they can before reaching some kind of compromise. And in many of those instances, there's real fears that by the time a compromise has been reached, there's been irreparable harm. You know, there's this, point of no return that's been reached in that particular sector. It brings into mind the role that management then ought to play if they are to avert a worst-case scenario, because we do know eventually compromise will have to be reached. This kind of situation is untenable. The question is, how long should management hold out?
Well, so the mining sector in South Africa has been very good at managing and understanding strikes. And so they're very good at sort of insulating themselves from the effects of strike, actually. And so the workers in this instance would break way before the management does. And that's why the management is willing to rebuff many of the ideas that the workers have of whatever power they think they have, right? So when you think about how the mine operates, each shift has a limit that they have a sort of target that they aim for. These targets have been overestimated to actually account for the strikes if they may come. And even if a strike does come, and let's say the management and the workers have been holding out for 2 months or so, what also happens is at the back end, if the management then agrees to whatever terms and workers come back to work, the targets are even higher, so they'll start to overwork them in order to recoup what they might have lost. And so the mines are very good at insulating themselves from the effects that might hamper the operations while strike action is taking place. And so I think the mines are much safer than the workers are. And so in that instance, I think what we're going to start to see is, and I think the mine workers are also aware of this, and what you're going to start to see is also communities getting involved, and not just the mine workers striking, but you're going to start to see the wives of mine workers on mine grounds while miners are sitting in. You're going to start to see a whole lot more violence in the communities around the mine in order to destabilize the mine operations in general, and not just what the mine does in its day-to-day operations. And I think that's going to be the next evolution of what the mining strikes and the mining sit-ins are going to be.
Sure. Of course, the importance of the story shouldn't be lost to us. Mining is one of the largest industries in at least 4 provinces in the country, including the Northwest. And we've already seen a contraction from the last GDP figures we've got from Stats SA. Needless to say, if we don't get this right, there's a big cost to be paid for our already ailing economy.
Yes, definitely. And I think the other problem is when you see areas like Velkom, right, when you see what they used to call the golden arc, is that when mining declines in a specific way, the government and any other entities around these communities have not thought of any specific way to to wean off these communities from the mining. And so that's why when you start to see the decline in mining numbers, you start to see a huge increase in the number of zamazamas in that area and people who are trying to mine informally to make a living, because nothing in the economy of those places speaks to anything outside of mining. If you go to these mining towns, you sort of see the nature of the town itself. It's the mine, and then all the other companies are companies that seek to supply some sort of service to the mine, cleaning the mine's equipment, giving the mine equipment, and all of those things. There's nothing outside of the economy of mining that happens in these towns, and I think that's going to be the major concern in the long run. So even if the strikes are a short-term thing, in South Africa, the long-term implication is that we have nothing to replace the mining economy with, of any kind of substance. And so that's why you see the zamazamas and the desperation that they show when they come into the fray, because that's the only economy that's driving the places where mining used to happen.
Leeto Nthoba, it's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much indeed for making time to share your insights. Leeto is a lecturer with the Central University of Technology, also speaking to us there as a political commentator. Once again, thanks very much indeed.